Hi, and welcome to Deacon Pat and Father Rich answer every single question under the sun.
At least on one sheet of paper.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go to confession for that one. That was a lie. That was a big fat lie. But how do we ask questions? How are we supposed to figure out that we're on the right path? How do we live, and how does our faith inform our life in this crazy world that keeps changing every single, minute? How do we do that?
Yeah.
Deacon Pat, how do we do that?
Well, this episode is brought to you by the letter D for discernment.
Discernment.
D. Okay. So I've asked Father Richard to ask 5 questions of me about discernment, and I've prepared my 5 questions for him about discernment. And what I'm going to do is we're going to actually exchange these, having not seen them at all, either one. So this is the first time we've done this. And so here are my questions.
And here are my questions.
Thank you.
They're much smaller than your questions.
Well, I use bigger type.
I added an extra question.
Oh, sly devil that you are. Oh, there's a number 6.
There is. That's the
All right,
extra.
all right.
So if you don't like one, you
I can
could
toss it?
Toss it. Options. It's all about options.
All right. Well, I'm going to start, I guess. 5 questions for discernment. Here we go. Number 1. What the heck is this discernment thing? Isn't it what people who want to be priests do? Very similar to one of my questions, as a matter of fact.
Probably.
That was my last one, I think. And I think the answer to that is pretty simple. Everyone needs to be doing discernment. All of us, no matter which part of life we're in, whether we're leading a single life, whether we're married, whether we're consecrated, whether we're ordained. Each of us has a responsibility to do continued discernment throughout our lives, certainly. Because finding God's will for your life is, let's face it, not that easy all the time. Sometimes it's very difficult to figure that out.
There is a passage in 1 Kings that I come back to all the time, and it's what we're going through in the cycle of readings right now. But Elijah is on the run for his life. He's depressed. He's giving up. And the angel comes and feeds him and says, hold tight, stay here. God's coming by in a minute. So Elijah stays in the cave, and a great storm of fire comes by, but God was not in the fire. And a great wind comes through, and God was not in the wind. And then a tiny, still voice was heard, and Elijah hid his face because he knew that God was there. I keep coming back to that because God's voice is in that tiny, still voice. And boy, is that hard to figure out when there's so much cacophony all around us all the time. So finding that is a constant in our lives. And the question more is, how do I calm things down to be able to hear that still voice for everything that I do? Should I take this job? Should I move to this place? Is this healthy? Am what I'm doing successful? How can I better help? How can I better live God's word? How can I better integrate my spirit into my daily life? And that's all part and parcel discernment. Is it always easier to discern when you are older? I don't know. My guess, because I never really tried discerning when I was younger. I came back to the faith at a much older age, and it was a catastrophe that brought me back to the faith. So I only started discerning after I was 40. And actually the first part of discerning was trying to figure out what the heck is this discerning thing anyway. I went to my parish pastor and said, Father Trey, how do I pray for discernment of spirits? And he gave me this look like, oh, isn't that cute? He's learned how to string words together. Oh, so precious. So I think it's challenging at any age is my guess, not knowing. But like any skill, like say cooking or writing, as you do it more and more, the toolbox becomes more comfortable, and it gets, if not easier, but more natural.
Yeah, I asked that question because in my eyes, it just seems like discernment is something that older people do, but In fact, sacramental theology would tell us that we're supposed to discern Eucharist, like our first communion.
Mm-hmm.
We should be like really thinking about that. And in my own life, discernment of marriage, like, is she the one? Is she the
Mm-hmm.
only one that God put on this earth for me? That was my countenance and
Yeah.
my sort of thought. And when I met my wife Ellie, it was like, whoa, yes, I get it now. But I was so lonely before
Mm-hmm.
and bounced around and just, so I think it's discernment is not just for older people. It's not just for priests, for sure. But we often tie the term discernment to priestly vocations, which is a shame.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we should be doing that with our kids and our friends and our brothers and our nephews, whatever, but we all need to be doing, it's like a universal call.
Very nice.
You're number 2. What's the difference between discerning and deciding? When do I have to discern? That's an interesting question. Because, like, if I go to 31 Flavors, I always have the ultimate decision to make. Do I get chocolate chip or mint chocolate chip? That's really the only, and you know what? If they don't have either one of those, I leave.
Wow.
That's a decision. It's a decision to leave, a decision to pick one or the other, but discernment's different. I think deciding comes like maybe after a period of discernment. In other words, the action of what is discernment calling me to do? It's calling me to move towards God in some way. So deciding is like, yep, I'm gone now.
Yeah, I would say something fairly similar. Discernment really for me is, how can I connect what I'm doing, thinking, living, and being as closely to God's will and what God knows is best for me at that moment. So when, for instance, the founder of the Paulist Fathers, Isaac Hecker, the order that I belong to and Deacon Pat is an affiliate of, he argued that discernment begins with some event, something that is just beyond our experience and explanation, and we have to explain that. So how do we do that? Well, we try to connect with God as much as possible, because this is supernatural. It's beyond our normal experience. And so I had one of those, and trying to wrap my head around it, I had to come to God in prayer and quiet in a way I'd never done before. And so for me, the discernment actually showed itself as a natural, although new and somewhat unnerving experience. But yeah, that's the basic gist I have. Deciding is the ice cream, and I will actually work my way through all 31 flavors several times, tasting along the way before I get there. Not from ballet.
I just want to add to that, I was thinking about Criminal Minds, and they use the word stressor all the time in those episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is the stressor that made this person kill 19 people or whatever? And I think, to me, I work as a law enforcement chaplain, and I enter into people's lives the worst moments of their entire life, often, where death is involved. Death from an accident, death from an overdose, death from old age, death from cancer, death, suicide. And this causes a huge stressor, a metaphysical stressor, really. And I think we see this at funerals all the time.
Mm-hmm.
People gather to remember the dead and to give them back to God, ultimately, in the funeral rites. And I think that this is where we often go, man, what am I doing? Who am I? What is my purpose on this planet? What do I do now? Where do I go?
Mm-hmm.
Discernment is where you go.
Yeah, the constant midlife crisis that can
Exactly.
pop up at any point in life.
Any point.
Some people buy fancy cars, some buy motorcycles. I became a priest.
Yep.
So your second is, what role do honesty and self-awareness play in discernment?
What do you think?
Well, I would say big roles. Yes, big roles. Part of my training to become a priest I had to go through a program called CPE, which is Clinical Pastoral Education. And I did that in a hospital which had a trauma bay. And I did not want to do that because I walked in with the idea of, if I hit this situation, I'm going to freeze. And I don't know how to deal with this situation, and forget about this other one. There's just no way I'm getting through that. And my very first night, the first situation, seeing children in pain from a car accident, happened. And then over the course of the training as a hospital chaplain, every single one of my fears happened. And so my last overnight, I walked in saying, I bet I know what's going to happen tonight. And I was right. And it was awful. And I got through it. One of the things my supervisor said to me as I explained my fears early on was, Richard, have you ever heard of faith? Oh, right. And what I discovered was, subconsciously, I had been completely honest with myself of, I'm discerning, still in the process of discerning to be a priest, even though I'm in the training for it. This is what I'm afraid of. How can I openly and honestly address these fears? Fears are a part of discernment as much as love and joy. So addressing those fears allowed me to experience them and understand that this is natural. I'm fine. I can get through this with the help of God. And so having that honesty and self-awareness played a huge part in my discernment process.
Yeah, the self-honesty and self-awareness, I think, is crucial, because if you don't really understand who you are, especially in relation to God, how can you understand who you are in relation to other people?
Mm-hmm.
And so often is the case, and I'm tipping my hat a little bit because I've got another question coming, but often other people see us in a way that we can't see ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and people go, yeah, have you ever thought of, no, I've never thought about it, whatever. But I think being open and being honest with yourself is sort of the beginning place of discernment, because you really, and oftentimes it's a metaphysical stress or a death or something can actually throw you into that without you really wanting to go there or be there, you know. But anyway.
Good question.
Cool. All right, where am I supposed to start? Which is really kind of, it's a perfect springboard into, you know, the answer, I guess, is wherever you are right now. That's where you can start. Wherever you are right now.
Yeah, I tried to make this as complicated as I possibly could, which is sort of a hallmark of my life and how I move things forward. So I tried to find books on discernment. I made my parish pastor giggle at me with discernment. And what I found was every time I kept getting closer to it, I kept getting more confused. Starting is as simple as, I have a question that I don't know how to answer. Should I move? Should I get married? Is this job right? Is this school right? Am I in the right major? Is this church right for me? Where am I not being fulfilled in my life? Just, that's the basic.
Yeah.
And then from there, all things spring. And there are certainly techniques, and different people have different ideas about how to go about it. St. Ignatius wrote a long list of battle orders. And
right. Who's got 30 days for the spiritual exercises? That's what I'd like to know in 2021.
Yeah, exactly. And 30 days without talking. I don't
No
see that
way.
happening. Not for
I went
us.
tallest, baby. Tallest all the way.
We don't believe in silence.
They let me talk.
Ever. But so there's that. Father Hecker has a sort more cyclical way of going about it. But each of us is going to bring our own gifts and talents to the process. But delaying the start until we have a full battle plan means, at least for me, I'm never going to start. So I would say we start with the question.
Yeah. And starting with the answer of I don't know is a really good place to start, because then you can be filled. God can fill you with answers. If you know everything all the time, how are you going to discern anything?
Which is how my life went so drastically off the rails at 20, because I did know everything. Unfortunately, everything I knew was wrong. Sometimes you realize your life is just an example of how not to do things.
Yeah, true that.
So we are up to 3?
I think so.
Okay. Is discernment a singular event or an ongoing process throughout your life? Oh, that's perfect. The answer to that is yes. Deacon Pat?
Very good Catholic answer, Father. I love it. I love it. And that's exactly right.
I mean, as we mentioned, Father Hecker's was very cyclical, and each process of discernment is going to open up new processes of discernment.
And problems.
And problems and questions.
Stuff
And
to deal with.
it's probably it may answer the first question. It's almost certainly going to keep adding questions. I was a history major in undergrad. Well, one of my undergrads. And one of the things that drove me to distraction was footnotes. Because I read something, I look at the footnote, then the footnote leads me to something, and then that leads me to another footnote, which leads me to another footnote. And
It's a
they
vortex.
breed.
It's a vortex.
They breed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can go down that rabbit hole forever, or you can make something useful of it, and that's the discernment process.
Exactly. All right. Number 4. When do I know that I'm doing it right? Very good question. I feel like you just know. I think when you feel like you're on the right track and you feel like you just might be walking maybe alongside of God's will for your life instead of away from the wrong direction, all of a sudden you just feel good. You feel right, and there's this little sneaky notion of happiness that enters into the picture. God wants us to be happy. He wants us to be filled with joy. That's His will for us. And so if we're not filled with joy and happy, then that's cause for discernment. But I think that I don't know. I'm not finding the right adjectives maybe in the words, but
No, it's a tough one. Our language, I don't think, is adequate to describe
mystery.
how we know. But there are times, and you've probably experienced them, I know I have, where everything just sort of clicks, and wow, this is too easy all of a sudden. That's probably a good sign that the path is correct. I mean, it's not always going to be bouncy, happy, happy, joy, joy moment either. I remember at one point I was praying, and I'd made this decision, okay, you know what? I don't know about this Catholic Church thing, but I'm going to try to go to Mass every day during Lent and see if bad things happen. Well, nothing bad happened. But at the time, I was suffering from this really awful bout of depression. And that was my prayer every day. God, I just would love a sign that what I'm doing is the right thing. Just anything, something, anything, don't care what it is. It doesn't need to be a burning bush. I really wanted a burning bush. And this went on for days, and then I went and visited my parents for a few days and went to church at a different place, came back 3 days later and said, God, you know what? I'm getting sick of this. Could I just have some sort of sign? And that's when the light bulb in my head went off that I had been completely symptom-free for 3 days, and I hadn't even noticed it. What a horse's ass I am. And I burst into tears.
Wow.
So sometimes we're just not seeing that sign. And that's where the still small voice comes back into play. So there are a lot of factors in place, and if we're not seeing any signs, it might be because there aren't any. It might be because we don't want to see them, or we're not open to seeing that particular thing, going back to the honesty and self-awareness.
Yeah. I can't really add to that. I think you got it.
Okay. Wow, I did something right today.
Oh, yeah.
I love that.
That was good.
Oh, here's that one. Why is that Why is it that others can often see in us that we cannot?
For me, I never saw diaconate. Never saw it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I never, like, I had this priest, Father Finucane, he was my pastor at the time, and he said, hey, you know, I want you to do such and such. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And he's like, well, I want you to go to this meeting, you know, and what's the meeting about? Well, it's about diaconate. I had never really even heard that word. I knew what a deacon was, but I had never heard diaconate. And I told him no. I said, that's not for me. I'm like not some holy guy. That's really not who I am, or there's nothing about that interests me. And you know, to be frank and honest, at the time in my life when he was asking me that, I was watching 3 movies every night.
Mm-hmm.
I was living a really selfish life, and it wasn't good, you know. But then he said to me, do you trust me? And I said, yeah, I do. I really did trust him. He was a good guy. And he said, well, would you go to this meeting as a favor to me? And I said, yeah, I'll do that, even though I think it's stupid. I'll go. And I went, and afterwards he asked me, what did you think? And I said, I think it's not for me. And he kept after me, and I began to mention what I was doing with these meetings that I was going to other people. And they were like, well, yeah, you should do that. You'd be great at that. And I was like, have you been talking to the Father Finucane? No, but you've got these gifts, Pat. You should really, maybe they're not all just for you, you know. And all the way through, and even when I entered into formation, like officially, I just struggled for the first 2 years of worthiness. You know, am I worthy? No, I'm not worthy. I should. So I kind of kept going, I'm not worthy, I should quit. Instead of the question of call didn't come in until like year 3. And then when I changed the question, I had a whole bunch of different answers. Is God calling me to be a deacon? Yeah, I think he might be. Dang, I don't really want to do this. But I think I should, because I think it might just be God's will. And, you know, same thing with law enforcement chaplaincy. I never wanted to be a chaplain. Just this Deacon Jim kept asking me over and over and over again. He drove me crazy.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting tangent that I'm going to follow and go completely off script with you on.
Okay.
Because, the idea of being a hospital chaplain, I did not want to do that one little bit.
I want to get involved with people suffering.
You know, and as it turns out, I seem to have some skills in that place, because I really thrived in my time doing that. So much so that I called the president of our order and said, they seem to like me down here, and we're talking about a residency of another year. How do you feel about that? To which he said, we'll keep that in prayer, which is boss for no. But all these things that I had just sort of dismissed, including being a priest, I was going to be a deacon. That was it. And I think worthiness was a big part of that. I didn't really start wrestling with that question until my diaconal ordination came closer and closer. And this was during the lockdown, the early lockdown of COVID. And there's just way too much time on my hands to deal with silly questions. And that question of worthiness is huge, but it's funny how we tend to often ask the wrong question. That was never the question. Are you worthy? Duh, no. Will you serve?
Totally different question.
And to that question, I could say yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But discernment was a big part of coming to asking the proper question.
Yeah, absolutely true. Cool. Okay, so number 5. You're number 5. How do I know when God's talking to me? Will I be hearing voices in my head?
Maybe.
I'm not the type of Christian that hears God speak to me. However, I'm in the midst of reading all these things about Hecker myself, because I'm preparing to, become official or whatever. And there are many parts of his life that resonate with me, where I read something someone else wrote, and I go, whoa, yes, that is me. Or I needed that right now. And so, for me, I think God speaks to me through other people. He speaks to me through homilies that I hear. He speaks to me through the Eucharist, definitely. I mean, God's body, that's amazing. Some of the books I read, I mean, also, I'm a visual guy. I'm a photographer. So, like the other night I was driving to church on Saturday night to preach, and the sunset was just amazing. And I was sitting there thinking, man, I hate doing first homilies. I hate doing first homilies. God, you're going to have to, oh, wow, look at that sunset. Duh! Like, I know in my heart God made that sunset just for me. The forest fires are accidental, you know what I mean? But I appreciate it very much. So God speaks all the time, but are we listening?
Yeah, no, I agree. And the visual aspect for me, too, is also huge. Just stepping outside and seeing something beautiful in something that's mundane, like a leaf or a tree or a flower, something that I've walked by a million times, but today somehow it comes into my focus. Or, the Bibles, the scriptures don't change, but I can read one piece of scripture one day and think, wow, this defines my life. And 3 weeks later, whatever. Yeah. And the same with prayers. So it's again, like you said, the idea of how do we be open and aware and really receptive to these different messages. And the idea of mindfulness, which is a modern thing that makes most people think of tree hugging and hippies, it's actually a very ancient technique going back to the Desert Fathers and Mothers and the patriarchs. They're describing this in their writings 1,500 years ago, 1,700 years ago. And that's why they went to the desert in the first place, was to pull the noise of modern life away. But they also discovered, you can do this in the middle of a city too. It just requires a different inner discipline. That same discipline, I think the word discipline scares many of us, but it's that same discipline that tells me, okay, I shouldn't eat the whole cake for breakfast. That's a discipline. It's not a very difficult one. Well, some days it is. But it's that idea. How do I develop these skills? And, talking to people is, for Father Hecker, certainly was a huge part of it. And I found the same thing, especially people who are in the same place.
Yes.
People who, when I was discerning the priesthood, there was a group of 9 of us that were in pretty tight communication scattered across the country. But wow, was that a help of, they were thinking things that I wasn't, and I was thinking things that they weren't, and we had some of the same questions and some of the same fears, and it was supportive and innovative and enlightening. And really, 9 heads were better than one. What I do know is, of this group, all of us are in different places now, and all of us seem happier.
Yeah, that's cool. All right. I can't remember whose question it is.
I lost track a long time ago.
I think it's your turn.
I think this is, as we come back to full circle, is discernment something only priests and deacons should be concerned with? And we hit on that earlier, and no, it's not. And it's kind of a shame that the language has dictated that this is what it is. We need a new word for this now, like mind happiness, or idea squish, or something.
Unicorns.
Well, that's something else too. So we almost need a new word for this process, because it's not just priests and deacons and people who are contemplating religious life. It's everybody all the time. We all have decisions. How do we make those choices? And sometimes we pull out the piece of paper and write down the pros and the cons and the balance sheet, and sometimes we open up a phone book and close our eyes and point. But having the ability, and this is one of the things that I find so fulfilling and wonderful about our faith, having the ability and the knowledge that God cares. God just cares about what we do and our happiness. So having that ability to be able to find the telephone line direct to God. God might not speak our language right away, but if we learn how to listen, we can pick up on where good things are.
I agree. Yeah, I can't stress enough that this video is for you no matter who you are. And not that we own the truth or anything like that, but it's just so essential that all of us be thoughtful, be purpose-driven, and where are we going? What's the end, where are we headed?
Yeah, so. And to top onto that, I mean, I am a priest now. I haven't been for long, but I am. You are a deacon. You've been a deacon for quite some time. Mm-hmm. We're still discerning. I'm discerning projects and plans and thoughts. I'm expected to file a report each year on my discernment and how that works with where I am and how my ministry's going. So this is a lifelong process for all of us.
Yes.
And I fully buy Father Hecker's idea that each act of discernment leads to new acts of discernment because the world keeps changing.
And our bonus question, number 6. How do I know when I'm done? I think we already answered it.
A couple of times.
You're never done.
The questions going. Yeah, the questions might change.
They do change.
But the process itself is everlasting. And it's along the way, it doesn't just give me answers. It gives me a better relationship with God, which makes everything easier and better.
Yeah. And I would say too that discernment is not relegated only to religious life or like trying to figure out God. I've had to do discernment over and over and over again in my life as a photographer. When I started, it was all black and white. I was printing my own pictures. Then I had to learn how to shoot color slide film. Then I had to learn how to print color from color negative. Then I had to learn how to scan with Photoshop 1.0 and send pictures over the phone wires. I mean, it just over and over and over again. I just kept having to learn, but in order to proceed and to keep going and to be successful, I had to learn new tricks. And I think so, to a certain degree, discernment is learning new tricks that make your life effective and trying to find your way in God's light.
Amen.
So sum it up for us. End it. We got to end this thing. Got to land this plane.
Discernment is very big. It is, and it's part of our lives. The beauty is, as we welcome the questions and the unknowing, we also welcome God into our lives, and God wants to be with us and share us the ways that are best for us.
The last thing I would say is thank you if you're still with us, thank you. And down below, we aim to engage with you. If you've got a question or a comment, or you want to kind of go down some pathway that we didn't explore or that we did, we're doing these YouTube videos not just for ourselves or for our benefit. We want to engage with you. So feel free to do that down below in the comment section.
Yeah, please, because I only have a very limited range of experience, and yours will open up new worlds.
That's it. So I'm Deacon Patrick saying thank you so much for watching, and hopefully we'll do this again.
And I'm Father Rich. Thank you for taking the time to share some of your life with us. God bless, and we'll see you soon.
Go Vols. Had to get that in there.
Yes, you did. I keep forgetting that.
Yeah, big orange country, man. We don't forget.
No. Thank you.
I think
that was fun.
Yeah, I think that was cool. And present to you the letter D.
I can't possibly take
I got
this.
enough to take back to my office here.